Okay, it is Wednesday, March 31st, 2021. Finishing off the month this week with our raw foods diet, right? And that's what we've been focusing on for the last couple of days of people who live a lifestyle where they don't actually cook anything that's over 104 degrees, right? So it's very difficult to come up with recipes to cook and show you that don't involve any actual cooking, right? So the recipe I chose for this week is a blueberry overnight oats. So whether you're a raw food vegan or not, or you're just looking for something healthier to have for breakfast, this is a great option, okay? This is also a good breakfast on the go type of recipe. So you can make it the night before, stick it in the fridge, hence the overnight part, and then just grab it in the morning, throw it in your bag, and out the door you go, right? And you're getting a good healthy breakfast without all the junk food. So I'm going to be building this recipe today in one of my favorite things, which is mason jars, right? Because they are reusable, right? I like things that last a long time and get multiple uses out of them. So this is what we call a pint-sized jar. And I do like the wide mouth jars for this, right? Because it's easier to get a spoon and things in there, but you can use the ones that are a little bit more narrow and that'll work just as well also, right? This is, like I said, 1 pint, so it's a 2-cup jar. So this recipe will fill it up about halfway. So you'll have a little bit of extra room for more toppings and berries and things like that. So you could use an 8-ounce jar, but you just might have to pack it in a little bit, okay? So any tight-fitting container with a nice tight-fitting lid will work, but look for something that's at least 1 cup, 8 ounces in volume size, right? So the glass jars here, like I said, they're easy to use, washable, use them, all that, you're good to go. So we're going to be starting off today with our liquid base to this recipe, okay? And that first ingredient is just going to be some Greek yogurt, right? So whole milk yogurt, you can use a low-fat version, things like that. But we're using a Greek yogurt, and I gave this a good stir because it's thicker, right? So that consistency is what we're looking for, right? You could use a flavored yogurt. This is an unsweetened one, right? So it's plain. Doesn't have anything extra, right? If you're trying to eat a little bit on the healthier side, that's what you want to go with, right? So we're going to be doing a 1/4 cup of our Greek yogurt in each of the jars. Measure that out. A little higher here. So a good 1/4 cup. You could, like I said, use a flavored yogurt or vanilla or strawberry yogurt as your base, especially if you're doing a berry one. But you may not want certain flavors depending on what the other add-in ingredients are, right? So you have to pick your flavor combination. So that's why a good plain, unflavored yogurt works good with anything. Okay. So we're going to do our second one here. Now, this recipe is in your Google Classroom, and I'll attach the link to the video as well, but it is from Quaker Oats, right? And there are many variations on their websites. And when you're looking for overnight oat recipes, just Google it, and you'll find tons of them on different websites and blogs and things like that. So lots of different flavor combinations, so you can make them every week and not get bored, right? Which is a great thing. So we've got our 1/4 cup of our plain Greek yogurt in each jar, right, to start off with. Now, this calls for just a regular low-fat milk. I'm mixing it up today, and we're going with almond milk, right? So this is a vanilla almond milk, because why not, right? It's also got more calcium and stuff, too. But you could easily sub in different things depending on that flavor profile you're going for. So you can use soy milk, oat milk. You could use the chocolate milks, right? So like a chocolate almond or chocolate soy milk, you know, if you wanted to go more that route, right? Instead of a fruit base, you want something that would work good with things like peanut butter. So we're going to do a 1/2 cup of almond milk in each of our jars here. This is going to be that, like I said, that liquid base. There we go. Right. And to this, I'm going to add just a little bit of sweetener to it. All right. A little drizzle here. Now, you can do different things for sweetness, right? If you're trying to avoid sugar totally, completely, right, you could go with an artificial sweetener, a thing like stevia, stuff like that. If you're trying to stay low sugar or just no sugar, depending on how sweet your fruit is as well, okay? We're going to be using 2 different sweeteners today. but in very small amounts, right? So the first one is going to be some vanilla sugar. And this is just sugar that I have some dried, spent vanilla beans. I dry them first and stick them in a jar of sugar. Boom, there you go, right? So that way nothing ever goes to waste. And I'm just gonna do a half a teaspoon of sugar, the vanilla sugar in each jar, right? So just to give this a little bit of sweetness, but also that extra vanilla flavor to add to the vanilla almond milk I'm already using, right? So it's a small amount of sugar. Like I said, we're containing the amount of calories and things that we're adding in. And I'm also gonna add in some cinnamon, right? So a good sprinkle of cinnamon. There you go. And then at this point, I like to stir this up because I want to dissolve that yogurt in, right? So I don't end up with just a weird lump of yogurt in the bottom, because I need this liquid to make the overnight oats work. This is what's going to absorb into my oatmeal. Now you could, if you don't like cinnamon, you could add in some nutmeg, a little cardamom, ginger, any spice that you like that you would normally use with baking would go great in this recipe, right? So now to this, I'm also going to add in some blueberries today, right? So I've got some fresh berries right here, right? Now you could also use frozen if you'd like. Just know that as the berries thaw out a little bit, they are going to, probably bleed a little bit of, berry juice and color into your item, which is fine though, right? So berries that work good in this, blueberries, blackberries, raspberries, strawberries, or you can do a combination do a mixed berry version, right, as well. So it doesn't have to, today we're just doing just blueberry, but you can make any combination you want. And also things like bananas, right? So if you like bananas, you can use those as well. So we're gonna do a 1/4 cup of our fresh blueberries here. And I wanted to measure that out to show you, but it's a small handful, right? That way you get a better idea of what that looks like, right? So for me, I have smaller hands. It's a small handful of berries. So I'm going to add a couple more on top after that as well, right? So we'll measure this out so they're all the same. That helps stop fighting, which jar's got more berries, right? So 1/4 cup of berries. Like I said, they could be any berry combination that you want. And you'll find that these will tend to sink down to the bottom of your jars as well, which is fine. You can just give this a stir as you're eating it. It already smells good. We got the almond, we got that little hint of vanilla sugar, the cinnamon, right? Now we've got our blueberries in there. Now we need to add in our oats, right? And that's what we're going to talk about next. So I am using name brand Quaker Oats for this one. You could use a store brand, right? But this is a Quaker recipe, so we want to be true to our recipe today. And what I'm using is that you want to look for is right here, right? Where it says old-fashioned oats, right? There are other variations of oats known as quick oats. And I find that they don't hold up as well, especially when you're doing something like this overnight, because we want this to slowly absorb all that liquid moisture from our almond milk, from our yogurt. And the quick oats tend to get a little bit more brittle, and they don't hold up as well. So these ones here will hold up great. You'll have a great texture to it. So always go and look for the old-fashioned style oats. So this is going to get 1/2 cup of oats in each jar, which is a serving size, right? So 1/2 cup of oats has 150 calories. Only 3 grams of fat, right? It's got carbs. You've got fiber, right? Now, oats are also good for lowering your cholesterol. It is good for managing your insulin levels, right, for diabetics. So this is a good breakfast for many to start off the day, right? And oats are also gluten-free. Okay, so now we've got our oats in. I'm going to give that a good stir. Like I said, if you were working with frozen fruit, I would add it in frozen because it'd be easier to stir and do all of this without mushing the berries and things up. If the berries are already thawed, you may just want to add some of them to the top of the jar once you have everything else mixed in. Especially things like raspberries and stuff tend to get smushed really easily. Now you could also, instead of adding sugar or honey or other sweeteners, is add a little bit of jam, right? So maybe a little strawberry jam, a tablespoon or so, a dollop on the top of your oats. And then you can stir that in as you eat it as well. Okay. Now we're going to finish this off with a little bit of garnishing, right? To make it feel like we're getting a little bit more of something to the top, right? So I'm embellishing today and adding to this recipe. So we're going to do a couple of things. We're going to add in some sliced almonds, right? You could use any other nuts, right? Peanuts, walnuts, pecans, right? Hazelnuts, macadamia nuts, whatever you've got on hand. I always take any nuts from recipes and things I buy, and I freeze the nuts so that they don't spoil and go bad, right? So this right here, you can just pull the nuts straight from the freezer, throw them in the jar, and you don't have to worry about thawing anything. So I'm going to use a tablespoon of the sliced almonds in each jar on the top. We're just going to add this on. Right? Like I said, this will give us a little extra crunch, right? And it'll look good when it's all put together as well. I'll have one that I'll be able to tip for you in a sec that's already done, because if we try and tip this now, right, it's going to make a huge mess, and we don't want that. So we're going to add that. Also going to add a few extra blueberries, right? Just a few up on top, so that way you know what it is. Like I said, a lot of these blueberries are kind of heavy, so they'll tend, like muffins, to sink down to the bottom. So we want to make sure that we get a little bit on the top to start off with too before we get to the bottom of the jar as we're eating it. Now I'm also going to add a little bit of honey. I only use a half a teaspoon of the vanilla sugar in the bottom, right? And that's the only sweetener I've added so far. So I'm just going to do a little drizzle of honey, so maybe up to a teaspoon's worth. But this recipe originally called for a tablespoon of honey anyways, right? So we're actually cutting back on the amount of sugar. You could leave these things out, right? So if you're trying to avoid extra sugars, don't have to put them in. But you'll notice I got my little honey bear here, and I've got them upside down. So if you're going to be working with honey, right, instead of waiting forever for that, flip it over while you're getting other stuff set up, and then it's ready to go, right? Makes it a little bit easier to dispense. So I'm just going to flip my little lid open, and I'm just going to give this a little drizzle of honey on the top. Now, the honey doesn't dissolve in as readily as other sweeteners. It will, because the milk is cold, it will kind of just set up and stay on the top of the jar, right? Which is just really good anyways. So it gives us a nice little glazing effect on the top. And then I'm going to add in just a hint more cinnamon, right? And you can add in as much as you like. So you can be a little more heavy-handed if you want. Okay. And that's pretty much it at this point. Now, with canning jars, I like to use these because, like I said, they're reusable and stuff. So these are the normal lids here. This is the lid I have on the vanilla sugar right now, right? So it's got a metal lid, sits on top of my jar, and it's got the little ring that goes around on the outside, right? So you can use those, but I like for traveling and things like this, these type of recipes that don't need to be processed and canned and things like that, is these plastic lids. You can buy these right in the canning aisle at your local retail store. Wherever you can find the jars, you'll find these as well. And these are just a nice little screw-on cap. You can also save lids from things like peanut butter jars, mayonnaise jars. Those will fit most of your canning jars as well. So always check out a lid to see if it'll fit those jars, and then wash them really good and save them, right? So at this point, you seal them up in your container, right? And then this sits in the fridge literally overnight. So you do this at night before bed. You can make enough for a few days worth, 2, 3, 4 days at most. And then I would probably make new ones at that point. So make a few jars. Now this will make just over, like I said, slightly over a cup total of volumes. That's why I use a 2-cup jar. So it makes it a little bit easier to, to eat it and whatnot without making a mess. So I've got a couple here that were done last night. Okay. So you guys can see the inside. So this one here I finished off same way, right? So I did almonds on top here and blueberries on top of the almonds, right? So either way, doesn't matter. You can get creative with it, right? A little bit of extra cinnamon on top. The honey's kind of soaked in, and it's made like a little caramely glaze to it, right? But you still have that crunchy texture and thing from the oats, the almonds and stuff like that, right? So that's what's good about it. Now, there are many variations that you can do on these overnight oats. Like I said, you can change up your fruit, berries, bananas, things like that. You can change up the milk. So you could use regular milk, you know, a skim milk, 1% cow's milk, or go the route like I did today, like a vanilla almond, a soy milk, or chocolate variations, right? So if you did a chocolate almond milk in here, instead, you could add things like maybe some, you know, peanut butter swirled in, right? Put in a good tablespoon of peanut butter and kind of swirl it into your oats. And that way you'll have that throughout. You can make coffee flavored milk using things like espresso powder, right? So add a little bit of espresso powder in to make some coffee flavored milk, give you a little extra boost in the morning as you go. But that's pretty much it, right? So that's your overnight oats. Like I said, super thick because they soak up all that liquid, right? Nothing's coming out. And it is a really good hearty breakfast that will keep you feeling full for a long time. So a lot of times you eat a little something and an hour later, you're like, oh, I'm still hungry. This will sit with you for a while, right? And that's a good thing about oats. Like I said, it's good for your heart. It's good for your cholesterol. It's good if you're diabetic, right? So you don't have to be on a raw foods diet per se to have something like this. And you get to be creative with it, right? Think of all the flavor combinations of stuff that you might already have in the house. You just want to try and, you know, limit the amount of things like sugary candy type stuff. You know, maybe a little bit of dark chocolate chopped up with the almonds, right? Like I said, things like that. Think about the spices that you have: cinnamon, nutmeg, cardamom. You could add in to give a little bit more flavor. So it's very versatile. You can make it different every single time, right? And that way, it's a good way to have something for breakfast that's filling, doesn't get boring. You know, you throw the lid on, throw it in your backpack, right? Your lunch bag, and out the door you go, right? And then that way you have your breakfast there. You don't have to think about it at that point, right? Especially early in the morning. So that's it for today. That's our blueberry overnight oats, right? Hopefully you guys will try this out and share with me your flavor combination.